The name is Thor.
The god of thunder knows how to deliver a serious beatdown. Villains quake in their boots when they have to face Thor in battle, and for good reason. But what about other superheroes? It's not uncommon for heroes to fight other heroes from time to time in Marvel's long history, and Thor is no exception. He's battled some of the other strongest heroes in the universe, and to no one's surprise, he usually wins. Today, I'll be talking about all the heroes Thor has used as a punching bag, ranked from weakest to strongest. Hulk, Iron Man, Wolverine. Oh man, these battles are epic. Let's get started right now.
Are we cool?
So, this is a ranked list, which means as I go on, I'll get to the more impressive, powerful superhero opponents that Thor has defeated, like your Wolverines, your Hulks, your Silver Surfers, etc. But first, I have to start at the bottom.
I like this one.
And that means starting with Union Jack. Now, there's a few versions of Union Jack, but I'm specifically talking about the Brian Fallsworth version of the character. This guy ended up taking a derivative of the super soldier serum and became strong and fast in the process. He became the hero known as Union Jack. Now, in the comic series The Invaders, which focused on a group of heroes like Captain America, Bucky, and the original android version of the Human Torch fighting in World War II, things got a little wild, and it led to Thor completely decimating poor Union Jack. So, turns out in this run of comics, Thor ended up joining forces with Hitler, but wait, it wasn't all his fault. The extreme dictator and failed painter ended up reaching out to Thor and manipulated him into helping the Germans by showing Thor that the Germans were the descendants of the people who originally worshipped the Asgardians. Yeah, that's awful. Then Thor was asked to take out the other horrible leader, Joseph Stalin, and the comic ended up with Thor zapping Stalin with electricity from his hammer, seemingly ending his life. But then it was revealed it was all a ruse, and it was actually Union Jack in disguise. So yep, Thor wound up frying Union Jack to a crisp without much pushback. But don't worry, it's a happy ending. When Thor realized his mistake and saw how he was being manipulated, Thor turned around and sucked all the electricity out of Union Jack's body to save him? How did that work? If Thor zaps me with lightning, he can't just turn around and say, "My bad," and pull it back out, right? Hey, just chalk it up to Asgardian magic, I guess. The benefit is that Union Jack was healed and he was somehow able to produce electricity and shoot out his own electrical blasts for a bit. Not a bad side effect of getting your butt kicked by Thor, right? You may not be as familiar with Gladiator as you are with others on this list, but he has an awesome cape and a cool mohawk, so I think he deserves some more recognition. Usually in the comics, he's portrayed as someone who has all these amazing superpowers, but can only use them depending on how confident he is. But no matter if he's just bursting with confidence, he's still not quite a match for the God of Thunder. Thor and Gladiator have battled a few times over their long comic history, and it usually doesn't end up great for Gladiator. There was one time early on when the two are trading blows, and Thor isn't sure how powerful Gladiator is and tries to hold back. But once he sees that Gladiator is a legit threat, Thor stops pulling his punches and attacks, and then just completely hammers his foe with Mjolnir until he's unconscious. Hey, at least you have a cool mohawk, right, Gladiator? So in the comics, there was a mortal by the name of Eric Masterson, who was at one point merged with Thor and gained all his powers. When the two were split, Masterson retained all of the God of Thunder's powers and even eventually tried to pass off as Thor himself while Thor was away. Of course, this didn't last when the real Thor came back and Masterson became a new hero named Thunderstrike, and even had his own Uru mace, which is pretty awesome. At one point in his history, Masterson fell to the classic mind control trick and tried to attack the OG Thor. And when the battle is between OG Thor and Thor Light, then you should always bet on OG Thor. If there's one major Thor character we have yet to see in the movies, it's Beta Ray Bill. The Corbinite is a fan favorite and has become a vital player in a lot of great Thor stories over the years.
For Asgard! For Corbin!
He's obviously most famous for being someone who's worthy enough to wield Mjolnir, and the hero and Thor have butted heads a lot as they battle for possession of the hammer. But here's the real difference between the two that proves that Thor is the strongest among the two of them. When Beta Ray Bill doesn't have the hammer or another similar weapon like Stormbreaker in his grasp, he can't really keep up with Thor's strength. Man, can we please get Beta Ray Bill in the MCU stats so that we can see these two heroes cross paths and trade blows? Is that too much to ask? Alright, this one is just straight up weird. In the big Thor vs. Storm fight that happened during the Tournament of Champions comic series, Thor won in a bit of an unconventional way. A lot of entries on this list is usually just Thor punching or zapping other heroes into submission, but not this time. While Thor and Storm battle it out, Thor pulls a crazy move and actually kisses Storm. By doing so, he actually sucks the breath out of the mutant, rendering her unconscious. So yes, although this is a big win as Storm is crazy strong with the lightning as well, it's not a victory that Thor should be that proud of. I would only like this more if this was the way Thor beat all of his fellow Avengers.
How about that?
Tony Stark may be one of the smartest minds in all the universe, but that can't really help him if he has an angry Asgardian standing in front of him. A fancy suit can only protect your fleshy body up to a point. Let me break it down. So during the famed Civil War storyline, Tony Stark got together with a bunch of other smarty pants and ended up cloning Thor so they would have a powerhouse weapon on their side. The OG Thor was not alive at this point in time, so Tony thought this was a good idea. Nope. It backfired when the clone went rogue and caused a bunch of damage because of course it did. So fast forward to after Thor is resurrected and he's not too happy about what Stark did with his genetic material, and the two have a showdown. Tony is way too arrogant and thinks his repulsors will be enough to hurt Thor, but when he blasts the God of Thunder, it has little effect, forcing Tony to try to take Thor on hand to hand. Now, Tony Stark trying to beat Thor in a fist fight is about as effective as suntanning in a snowstorm. It doesn't work. Thor kicks Tony's butt, saying he isn't holding back and just basically turns Iron Man into a pile of worthless junk. Yeah, don't make Thor mad, guys, you understand? If you ever want to clone him or something, I would suggest you reconsider. I don't think The Thing gets enough credit. Yes, all of us Fantastic Four fans love him, but when you think of giant super strong brutes in Marvel Comics, you normally think of heroes like Hulk first before Ben Grimm. And that's a shame, because The Thing is said to be able to lift close to 100 tons and withstand all sorts of exterior damage. He's one tough rock. But of course, now I feel bad. I just spent all this time hyping him up, and now I gotta talk about how Thor totally clobbered him. It's pretty brutal. There's a storyline called Fear Itself, where the Thing is given an ancient Asgardian hammer that corrupts him and turns him evil. It also gives him an insane power boost. The Thing is already strong, so you didn't need to make him stronger. But it still doesn't matter. When Ben Grimm goes up against Thor with his newfound evil powers, Thor ends up just chucking Mjolnir at the Thing, and it ends up crushing the Thing's chest and proving fatal. Yeah, if that hammer is coming at you, you probably better just duck. Namor just always seems like a guy itching for a fight. He's a little arrogant and doesn't take too kindly to disses or insults. And while he's impressive with his strength and swimming ability, the comics have proven he's not much of a match for the God of Thunder. I mean, that's just a given, right?
I accept your surrender.
In a battle between electricity and water, electricity is probably going to win every time, right? But anyways, my favorite Namor versus Thor fight happens again in the Invaders comic arc. Namor sees Thor and wants to go put a stop to him, but Thor just ends up knocking Namor out with one punch. Now, there are other battles, but this one is a lot of fun in its simplicity. Just call Thor One Punch Man. Wolverine has an incredibly persistent attitude paired with near indestructibility thanks to an epic 1-2 combo of his major healing factor and his adamantium casing. But how would something like this fare against the God of Thunder? Unfortunately, not great. That's what happens when your opponent is just too strong. There's a comic series out there that's called Wolverine vs. Thor, and if you can't figure it out by the title, well, it's about Wolverine vs. Thor. In one of their confrontations, Logan is suffering from a delusion where he thinks his mortal enemy Sabretooth is back from the grave, but in reality, it's just Thor. As the God of Thunder tries to figure out what's wrong with Wolverine, he does end up taking a few scratches from Logan as Thor underestimates just how strong the mutant is when he's angry. But after a little bit of cat and mouse, Thor gets really angry and finishes the fight relatively quickly. He calls down the awesome might of an electrical blast from Mjolnir and zaps Logan. It's enough to reboot Logan's brain and make him see that it's Thor and not Sabretooth.
Peaceful God.
So I just want to confirm that Thor's lightning blasts are basically the human equivalent of turning the computer off and on again to see if that fixes the problem. When in doubt, zap it. I think Vision is one of the most powerful MCU characters that hasn't been given the proper chance to show his true strength. He's not only indestructible and incredibly strong, but he also has the ability to phase through people and objects, which is an incredibly underrated power. But it didn't quite work when he battled Thor. In one of the Avengers annual comics, Thor is possessed by an alien and turns against his fellow heroes. Vision decides the best way to end the fight is to briefly phase through Thor and stop his heart so that Thor would pass out. Yeah, this doesn't work. Right when Vision is beginning to phase, Thor jabs his hammer inside Vision's body and lets off a little electrical jolt that completely dispatches Vision from the fight. Gotta be quicker than that, Vision. Alright, I wanted to include one DC hero on this list that Thor has beaten in order to mix things up a bit. And comic history is full of fascinating DC versus Marvel matchups. In one special issue, Thor fought Shazam in an epic brawl. Both are incredibly strong individuals, so there wasn't a chance one could just knock out the other. But the way Thor wins this fight is fun. So there's a moment where Shazam is trapped under some rubble, so he utters his catchphrase of Shazam to turn back into Billy Batson to crawl out. He says Shazam again to turn back into hero mode, and Thor realizes the lightning is the source of his power. So Thor throws his hammer into the path of the lightning bolt and intercepts the Shazam bolt. It stuns Thor for just a second, but then he's fine, and then Thor just declares he's won the fight. It's a little weird because what's stopping Billy from saying it again, but a win is a win, I guess. In a battle between Thor versus Thor, who do you think wins? Well, that's easy. The answer is Thor. But it's the real Thor and not the fake Thor. Let me explain. Remember a few entries ago when I said Thor totally humiliated Iron Man because Iron Man made a clone of the God of Thunder during the Civil War story and it went horribly wrong? Well, fast forward to the Siege comic event where the clone is going on a rampage, taking out the Warriors 3 and Bill Foster before finally having a showdown with Thor himself. The clone Thor rambles on about how he's the best, the most powerful, the strongest, etc. But of course, this doesn't go over well. Thor summons a massive attack and smashes the clone to bits without a second thought. We've seen the Norse gods completely dominate the MCU, but there are others out there. What about the Greek gods? Yes, probably the best comparison to Thor over on the Greek side of things is Hercules. If there's one thing that probably everyone knows about Hercules is that he's almost unparalleled in strength. And yep, Thor has beaten him. Again, just like a lot of entries on this list, it comes down to the variety of abilities Thor has. Although he has won against Hercules in a straight-up fistfight, this specific instance, Thor took out Hercules by blasting him with lightning. So yes, Thor's lightning ability is probably the best weapon in his arsenal, and I wish we could see more variations of it in the MCU. The Silver Surfer is a character who fans desperately want to see in the MCU, and for good reason. He's one of the most complex and fascinating cosmic characters in Marvel Comics. And yes, while he has a bit of a silly name, he's not to be trifled with thanks to the power cosmic. You know, one of those all-powerful forces you find in the universe? Yeah, he has that. Anyway, he's strong, but like everyone else on this list, he too fell under the awesome might of Thor. One instance is particularly brutal. While Thor is breaking bad and beating up Beta Ray Bill, the Silver Surfer feels a bit of responsibility to help Bill and tries to intervene. Big mistake. Thor gets angry and unleashes his fury on Silver Surfer, and the cosmic being is only saved by Beta Ray Bill stopping the God of Thunder. It makes me really want to see the Silver Surfer in the MCU interact with Thor. I feel like these two would have a lot to talk about. What do you think? Alright, at the very top of this list is arguably the strongest hero in the universe. We're big Hulk fans here at CBR, and it's probably a safe bet to assume you are too. And I think one of the most interesting pseudo-rivalries in all of Marvel Comics is the many, many times Thor and Hulk have gone toe-to-toe. Both of these heroes are in a whole other league when it comes to strength, and it makes sense to have them fight each other because of it. They both can unleash their full strength in a fight without worrying about turning one another to a puddle on the floor. And I've saved Hulk for last because yes, he's arguably the strongest hero Thor has beaten, but also because he's lost to him a bunch as well. In all of their battles, I think it's usually some sort of draw, and it's very rare when one of them truly gets the upper hand. The fight, though, that I want to specifically mention is the one in the Incredible Hulk Annual #1 from 2001. In the comic, Hulk is rampaging as usual, and Thor is near nearby and tries to subdue his former ally. Their fight is epic, as at one point Thor realizes how much damage they're doing and uses magic from the hammer to transport them to another dimension. Once there, Thor is buried by an avalanche and Hulk jumps away to explore. Thor eventually breaks free and even considers leaving Hulk in this dimension, but realizes he can't do that without making sure Hulk would be well off here. Their battle culminates in Thor knocking Hulk out with, you guessed it, a giant lightning blast. Of course, this doesn't last forever as Hulk wakes up soon after, but I count this one as a major Thor victory because at the end of the day, he understands Hulk way more than he did before. Thor is obviously super powerful and can challenge just about anyone in Marvel Comics, but who do you think in the MCU is capable of beating him? Like, I imagine magic users like Doctor Strange and Scarlet Witch have a big advantage, right? What about Captain Marvel? All those fights I would highly enjoy watching. Make it happen, Kevin Feige, please!